Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping into what historians often call the critical period in American history. That's roughly 1776 to 1790.
Right. It's that time after the fighting stops, but before the United States really figures out how to stand on its own 2 feet.
Exactly. If the revolution was about winning independence, this next phase was about the messy, uncertain business of, well, what do you do with it?
And our mission today, using the American pageant as our guide, is to walk through that, how we went from this loose collection of states under the, frankly, pretty weak Articles of Confederation to the Constitution we have today. And it was definitely not a smooth ride, a very shaky start, you could say.
Shaky is putting it mildly. The economy was in rough shape. The source mentions things hitting bottom around 1786.
Yeah, and you had British manufacturers just dumping cheap goods onto the market. It was crushing those new American industries that had popped up during the war.
Right, the war baby industries. I saw that detail about a Philadelphia newspaper telling people to wear homespun cloth, wear the webs of liberty, trying to support local stuff.
A nice patriotic slogan, but, facing tough economic realities.
Yeah.
Still, it wasn't all doom and gloom. There were hopeful signs.
Like what?
Well, the states mostly shared a common political background, similar ideas about government, and, crucially, they had some really remarkable leaders emerging. Washington, Madison, Hamilton.
Yeah.
People who understood the stakes.
Okay, so let's start where they started. Building governments in the states. The Continental Congress basically told the colonies, okay, you're states now, figure out your constitutions.
And the big idea was popular sovereignty. Power comes from the people. This led them to write things down.
Unlike the British system, right, which was more based on tradition, laws piling up over time.
Exactly. These new state constitutions were actual written contracts. They spelled out government powers, included bills of rights, very explicit.
But they were really wary of strong executives, weren't they, because of the whole experience with royal governors?
Deeply distrustful. So they created weak governors and weak judicial branches. All the power, or most of it anyway, got concentrated in the legislatures.
Which sounds democratic, but potentially dangerous.
Thomas Jefferson thought so. He famously warned that having, 173 dictators in a legislature could be just as bad as one king.
That's a strong warning. Now, Massachusetts did something really interesting in 1780, didn't they?
They did. This is key. They didn't just let the legislature write the Constitution. They called a special convention just for that purpose.
Okay.
And then they submitted that draft Constitution directly to the people for a vote, for ratification.
Ah, so the people themselves approve the fundamental rules of the game?
Precisely. That model, the special convention and popular ratification that becomes the blueprint for the federal Constitution later on. It's a major innovation.
And beyond the political structures, the revolutionary spirit was causing other ripples, right? Social changes.
Definitely. Things like ending primogeniture, that old rule where the oldest son inherits everything, that started to go away, broadening land ownership.
And the fight for religious freedom?
Yes, the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom in 1786, pushed by Jefferson and Baptists mainly, a landmark separation of church and state.
But the big unfinished business was slavery.
Painfully unfinished. You saw some progress in the North. Philadelphia Quakers founded the first anti-slavery society back in 1775. Some northern states started down the path of gradual abolition.
And that Massachusetts case? The Quack Walker case?
Right, 1783. The state Supreme Court basically said slavery didn't fit with the Massachusetts Bill of Rights. So slavery effectively ended there.
But only there in the North?
Well, north of Pennsylvania, yes. No southern state took that step. That fundamental divide remained, and it leads us right into the first attempt at a national government, the Articles of Confederation.
Adopted by Congress in 77, but not actually ratified by all the states until 1781. Why did it take 4 years?
One main reason: Western lands. It was a huge point of contention.
How so?
You had states like Maryland that didn't have claims to vast territories out west. Then you had states like Virginia with enormous claims.
Okay.
Maryland and others basically said, hold on. If Virginia sells off all that land, they can pay their war debts easily. We landless states will be stuck paying the national debt through taxes. They refused to ratify until the land-rich states agreed to cede their Western claims to the central government.
Ah, so everyone shares in the potential wealth and the burden.
Exactly. And Congress made a crucial promise. Those ceded lands wouldn't be colonies. They'd eventually become new, equal states. Republican states.
That promise was key, wasn't it? It kept the states invested in the idea of a union, even a weak one.
An invaluable bond, yes. Because looking at the articles themselves, well, firm legal friendship was about right. It wasn't much of a government.
It seems designed to be weak. No president, no national court system.
And the structure of Congress was difficult. Each state got just one vote. Little Rhode Island had the same power as huge Virginia.
And passing anything significant required 9 states.
9 out of 13. And to actually change the articles, you needed unanimous agreement.
Unanimous? That sounds impossible.
Pretty much was. Which brings us to the 2 killer weaknesses. First, Congress couldn't regulate commerce.
Meaning states could just put tariffs on goods from other states.
Yes. Like that example of New York taxing firewood from Connecticut. Imagine the chaos for trade.
Wow. Okay, and the second weakness?
No power to enforce tax collection. Congress could figure out how much money it needed, divide it up among the states, and then basically just ask politely for the money. Government by supplication, they called it.
So it could advise, it could request, but it couldn't compel.
Couldn't compel anything, really.
Yeah.
A government with no teeth.
But, okay, despite all these weaknesses, you mentioned that land policy was a success.
A major one. They passed 2 incredibly important laws under the Articles. First, the Land Ordinance of 1785.
What did that do?
It set up a system for surveying and selling the land in the Old Northwest. That's the area north of the Ohio River. It divided the land into 6-mile square townships.
Well, wasn't there something about schools?
Yes, absolutely crucial. The 16th section of each township was set aside specifically to fund public schools, a priceless gift to education, as the source notes. Really forward-thinking.
Okay. And the second big land law?
The Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This was even more groundbreaking. It laid out the process for how territories could become states.
Not colonies, but states.
Equal states. It involves stages. First, Congress appoints officials. Then, when the population grows, they get an elected assembly. And finally, at 60,000 inhabitants, they could apply for full statehood.
And crucially,
It forbade slavery in the entire Northwest Territory. A really significant decision that set a precedent.
so success in planning for the West, but weakness everywhere else. It feels like a collision course.
It was. By the mid-1780s, things were really falling apart. The weaknesses of the Articles were becoming painfully obvious both at home and abroad.
What was happening internationally?
Well, Britain basically snubbed the U.S., refused a trade treaty, kept soldiers in forts on American soil, violating the peace treaty.
Yeah.
Spain closed the Mississippi River to American shipping in 1784. That was a potential death blow to Western farmers who needed the river to get their crops to market.
Plus pirates.
Yes. The Day of Algiers and other North African pirates were having a field day capturing American ships and sailors in the Mediterranean. The U.S. was too weak to fight back and too poor to pay the bribes. John Jay actually hoped these insults would force Americans to see the need for a stronger government.
Humiliation as a motivator.
Sometimes it works, but the internal problems were maybe even scarier for the elite.
The states fighting amongst themselves? The tariffs we mentioned?
Yes, and printing worthless paper money. Economic chaos. And then came the breaking point. Shays Rebellion in 1786.
Tell us about that. What happened?
It started in western Massachusetts. Farmers, many of them Revolutionary War veterans, were losing their farms because they couldn't pay debts and taxes.
So they protested.
Led by Daniel Shays, another veteran, they demanded the state issue paper money, lighten taxes, stop foreclosures. It got violent. They tried to seize arsenals.
And the national government couldn't stop it.
The Confederation Congress was powerless. Massachusetts had to raise a private army funded by wealthy citizens to put the rebellion down.
Wow. That must have terrified people like Washington and Hamilton.
It absolutely did. The specter of mobocracy, of the country descending into anarchy. Shays' rebellion, ironically, probably did more than anything else to convince the elites that the Articles needed serious fixing or replacing.
So, in a way, Daniel Shays is a founding father, too, by scaring them into action.
You could certainly argue that. It directly led to the call for a convention. First, the poorly attended one in Annapolis in 1786.
Right, only 5 states showed up.
But Alexander Hamilton salvaged it. He got them to call for another convention in Philadelphia the next year, May 1787, with a broader mandate to fix the Articles.
And this time, they came.
55 delegates from 12 states. Rhode Island, predictably, refused to send anyone.
And these delegates were, well, who were they?
An impressive group, mostly lawyers, merchants, planters, wealthy, educated, relatively young, average age 42. Jefferson called them demigods.
Though he wasn't there, right? He was in Paris.
Correct. Neither was John Adams, who was in London. And Patrick Henry refused to go, famously saying he smelled a rat.
He feared they'd create too strong a government.
He did. But the men who did go, Washington, who presided, Franklin, Madison, Hamilton, they were nationalists. They believed a stronger central government was essential to save the Union, protect property, and command respect internationally.
And they met in secret.
Complete secrecy. Windows shut tight in the Philadelphia summer heat. They didn't want public pressure interfering.
So their official job was to revise the Articles, but they did more than that.
Much more. They quickly decided the Articles were beyond repair. They needed a whole new structure. They essentially staged a peaceful coup d'etat.
And the first big fight was over how states would be represented, right?
Right.
Big states versus small states.
Yeah. Exactly. James Madison arrived with the Virginia Plan, basically proposing representation in both houses of Congress based on population. Good for big states like Virginia.
But not so good for smaller states like New Jersey or Delaware.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So they countered with the New Jersey Plan, equal representation for all states in a single house, pretty much like the Articles.
Stalemate. How did they break it?
Through compromise. The Great Compromise, it's often called. Connecticut played a key role.
What was the deal?
A two-house Congress, a bicameral legislature. The House of Representatives would have representation based on state populations satisfying the large states.
Okay.
And the Senate would have equal representation, 2 senators per state, regardless of size. That satisfied the small states. Plus, bills dealing with taxes had to start in the House.
A balance between population and state equality.
A crucial balance. That unlocked the convention. But other compromises were needed, especially over slavery.
Yes, the unavoidable issue. How did they handle counting slaves for representation?
Another messy compromise. The South wanted slaves counted fully for representation in the House, boosting their power. The North generally disagreed, though some wanted them counted for taxation purposes.
So what was the solution?
The infamous 3/5 compromise. They decided a slave would count as 3/5 of a person when determining a state's population for both representation and direct taxes, a purely arbitrary political fix.
And what about the slave trade itself, importing slaves from Africa?
Deeply contentious. Most states wanted to stop it, but South Carolina and Georgia insisted it continue, threatening to walk out otherwise.
Another compromise.
Yes. They agreed Congress couldn't prohibit the international slave trade until 1808, 20 years down the road, a temporary protection for a practice many delegates knew was wrong, but they felt union was paramount.
So compromises on representation, on slavery. What about the president? How did they design the executive branch?
They wanted a strong, independent executive, unlike under the Articles, but they were still nervous about too much power, and they really debated how the president should be elected.
Direct election.
Some proposed it, but many feared the uninformed masses. Election by Congress was another idea, but that risked making the president dependent on the legislature.
So they invented the Electoral College.
Exactly. A sort of indirect election. Each state gets electors based on its total number of representatives and senators. Those electors then choose the president. It was another compromise, designed to buffer direct democracy.
It seems like a lot of the Constitution was designed to limit direct democracy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The framers were creating a republic, not a pure democracy. Think about the safeguards. Federal judges appointed for life, not elected. Senators originally chosen by state legislatures, not the people directly. The president chosen indirectly.
Only the House of Representatives was directly elected by the voters.
By the qualified voters, yes. And qualifications varied by state, often involving property ownership. So it was a government built on popular consent, but filtered through representative structures and checks and balances.
Okay, so the demigods finished their work in September 1787. Now they have to sell it to the country.
And they knew it would be tough. So they bypassed the rules of the Articles again. Instead of needing unanimous approval from state legislatures,
What did they require?
they stipulated that the Constitution would go into effect once it was ratified by special conventions in just 9 of the 13 states. A bold, maybe even revolutionary move.
And the fight was on. Federalists versus Anti-Federalists.
Right. The Federalists, led by figures like Washington, Hamilton, Madison, generally represented the wealthier, more established coastal interests. They had the newspapers, the organization. They argued the country needed this stronger government to survive.
And the Anti-Federalists.
They tended to be small farmers, frontiersmen, debtors, states' rights advocates like Patrick Henry and Samuel Adams. They feared the new government would be too powerful, too aristocratic, too distant.
And what was their biggest criticism?
The lack of a Bill of Rights. They were deeply suspicious of a powerful central government that didn't explicitly guarantee individual liberties like free speech or trial by jury.
That seems like a reasonable concern.
It was a very powerful argument to counter anti-Federalist critiques, especially in the crucial state of New York.
That's where the Federalist Papers come in.
Exactly. A series of brilliant essays written by Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay, published in newspapers, arguing forcefully for ratification.
And Federalist number 10 by Madison is maybe the most famous.
It is. It tackled a classic fear that republics could only work in small territories. Madison flipped that argument on its head.
How?
He argued that in a large, diverse republic, you'd have so many different factions and interests that no single one could easily dominate. They'd check and balance each other. It was a radical defense of a large republic.
So how did ratification actually play out? Was it easy?
Far from it. It was a close-run thing in several key states. Delaware ratified first, quickly. Pennsylvania followed. But then came Massachusetts.
A big test.
Huge. The convention there was full of Shayites and Anti-Federalists. It only ratified after Federalists promised to support adding a Bill of Rights later as amendments.
That promise was key then.
Absolutely. It became the strategy. Promise a Bill of Rights to ease fears. Virginia and New York were the next crucial battlegrounds. They were large and powerful. The Union arguably couldn't survive without them.
And they eventually came around.
They did, but narrowly. New York ratified by only 3 votes, 30 to 27. Eventually, all 13 states joined, though North Carolina and Rhode Island held out for a while even after the new government was up and running.
So ratification succeeded. A conservative triumph, as the text suggests.
In a sense, it was definitely pushed through by a determined, well-organized minority. Remember, only about a quarter of adult white males actually voted for the delegates to the ratifying conventions. But it succeeded in creating a framework that balanced liberty and order.
Using checks and balances, separation of powers.
Exactly. Embedding self-rule within a system designed to limit power. And there's one more social outcome we should touch on. Republican motherhood.
What was that about?
It tied into the idea of civic virtue. For a republic to work, you need virtuous, educated citizens.
Yeah.
And who raises the children?
Their mothers.
Right. So the ideal emerged that women had a crucial civic role as mothers, responsible for instilling morality and patriotism in the next generation.
Did this actually improve things for women?
It did, somewhat. It elevated their status as keepers of the nation's conscience and led to expanded educational opportunities for women so they could fulfill this important role. It wasn't equality, but it was a step.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've gone from the chaos and weakness of the Articles through crisis and rebellion to this intense convention, fierce debates, and finally, a new, much stronger federal government established by the Constitution. A massive transformation.
Truly massive. From that government by supplication to a government with real power, built on negotiation and, well, a whole lot of compromise, it created the longest-lived written Constitution still in effect today.
So you now have the essential story of how that shaky start eventually led to a durable framework for the United States.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Consider the paradox. The Constitution was framed largely by conservatives, men who feared the excesses of democracy seen after the Revolution. They wanted stability, order, protection for property.
Right.
Yet, in creating a large, diverse republic and arguing for its stability, like Madison did in Federalist number 10, they actually ended up institutionalizing perhaps the most radical political idea of the age. That a government based on popular sovereignty could function effectively over a vast territory. They challenged centuries of political thought.
So conservatives, in trying to control the revolution, actually ended up embedding its core principles in a lasting structure.
That's one way to think about it. They built something more durable and perhaps more revolutionary in the long run than even they fully realized at the time.
Thank you for diving deep with us. We hope this knowledge serves you well.